Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Alejandro Perez, the CGI Nerd, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at creating this flip fluid splash effect where when it splashes it creates a piece of geometry. In this case it says CGI Nerd, but it could be any geometry. It can be a character, it can be a logo, it could be even animated. So we're going to be using suction fluids in order to be able to achieve this. If you want access to the project files and you are in my course, you can go to my courses and download the file there. If you are not in my course, you can go to Patreon and you have access to the files through Patreon by becoming a patron. All right, let's get started. Okay, to start, what we want to do is build the text that we're going to be working with. And that will be under font. So we have font here. And then we want to go into the font. And let's say what we want for the text. In this case, I'm just going to put CGI Nerd, but you could put whatever text you would like. And then I'll call this CGI Nerd font. There we go. If we scroll down here, we can see some of the settings. I know that I'm going to want to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make this 20. It's going to take forever to simulate, but it'll get me a little bit easier result that way. Then I am going to scroll the origin up. And let's look at this from the front viewport. So we can look here, front viewport, just so that I can align it just right on the ground plane. And that looks okay. And then let's go back to perspective. There we go. This is going to be the CGI Nerd Geo. Let's go back in here. And now I want to make sure that we can extrude this. So right now it's only polygons. That's great. I'm going to go in here and do a poly extrude. And then let's set a distance so that it has some thickness. And then on this extrude, we're also going to tell it to output to back, so that way it's a solid object. There we go. So we have the CGI Nerd logo here, and then what I'm just going to do really quick is a transform. And on this transform, I want to rotate it. Because we're not visualizing it, let's visualize that. And then I want to rotate. Negative 90 degrees. So that way it's flat on the ground. And we can see it kind of like that. That is great. So that's the geometry we have for the text and what we're going to use. Now I'm going to create a box. And then let's adjust the size of this box. And then along to the X, it needs to be bigger. Let's move the center along the Z and up in the Y, because I'm going to have it falling down. Let's make this a polygon mesh, and then I'm going to increase the segments, so maybe like 100, 10, and let's look at the ends. We can add like, there we go, that looks a lot better. Do I want to add more? Maybe 15. There we go. Something like that. The only reason I'm adding is so that we can add some noise. Just gonna put a mountain node in. And then let's adjust the height some. Something like that. Maybe let's add a smooth in between. Just to soften off the edges. Something kind of like that. Now we could see the rippliness of it there. Maybe now that I've smoothed it out, the rippliness is too much, but that's good. There we go. Okay, so now that we have that geometry, this is going to be our water geo. And that water geo is going to be the what we're going to use as the shape that's going to become the water. So, if I could spell that right, water. So with this selected, I'm going to go to the particle fluids and go to flip fluids from object. It's going to take a little moment to calculate out. There we go. So let's play this, and because of the scale of the scene, it's going to be quite slow. So you can see it is taking a while here. It's even larger than this box that we have here. So now that I can see this, and each one of these units is 1 meter. So let me escape. So you can see how long that is taking, and that's probably going to be quite a bit longer than what I really want for mine. So let's go here, water geo, and let's go to the box and adjust the size here. Let's make this maybe 10 meters by, and it's trying to calculate everything. So let's go to frame 1 and turn off the simulations really quick. So we can push this button down here and turn off the simulations. 3, 3. And then let's make it maybe 5 units up. Oh, sorry, that's the divisions. That's not what I want to adjust. I want to adjust this. So the water's going to be about 3 meters high. Okay, then let's take the text here, and we did make it bigger to work with, but let's see if we can at least get it small to start off with. And let's see, the water is there. Let's see, that's pretty big text there now. The water is too much though, but I like where this is going. Let's go to the water geo. Oh, it's because it's not calculated. That is a lot better. So on the mountain node, on the height, I'm going to bring this down. And the origin of this box, let's bring it up a little bit higher. So this is still a big shape. It's just going to be less particles to calculate, and size is less crazy. Okay, I'm going to turn the simulations back on and see what happens. So we're going to go to here, and we can see that calculated out way quicker. Let's push play here. That's definitely manageable. Okay. Now that we have a more manageable fluid with a more manageable scale, this is like, what, 12 meters wide and, I don't know, like 1.5 meters or 2 meters tall. So it is a big object there. I'm going to go to collisions and let's add a ground plane. And I'm just going to turn the visibility off on the ground plane because I don't need to see it. I just need it there to do its magic. There we go. So it goes through and it scatters out. It is looking good. So if we play this back now that it's cached, you can see a little bit more what it is doing. Which looks great. I like it. This CGI Nerd text here is not going to be visible, so right now it's just the water. Okay, so let's go to the auto.network. I'm going to push L to lay out the nodes that we have here. And now I want to go ahead and select this. And we're going to go down to particle fluids. Particle fluids, there we go. And we're going to use a suction fluid here. If we hover over it, we can see it tells us creates a suction force to guide particle fluids towards a target. So the target's going to be our word or whatever geometry. It could be a character, it can be an object, it can be a logo, whatever you want. So I'm going to deselect everything. And then I'm going to go to suction force. Then it's going to tell me here, select object for suction fluid. I select that. Oops, I did that wrong. So I'm going to push escape to do that again. Basically, this time I want to select the geometry here. Deselect that and then go to suction fluid. Select objects for suction fluid. You're going to select that object there. Push enter. Then select flip fluid, which is going to be this flip fluid object here. Push enter. There we go. So I'm going to push play and we can look at the difference now. And I'm going to go out here to the object level. You can see it's a little bit slower already. And it goes through and it splashes. But there's something weird going on here, isn't there? And that is the section starting to work. So let's go ahead and turn off the visibility on here, and you can see that it is really starting to work. So I want to clean this up a little bit and make it work where it splashes down and then it creates the shape. Let's look at the geometry here really quick so that we can make sure that the section target is looking the way we want. So right now we're just highlighting the transform, which is the last thing that we did to this object. But when we created the suction force, it created these other nodes. So we have the suction target here, and if we look closely, we have some particles that it's created based off of the geometry. Then we have velocity and volume. What I want to look at is the volume. So this is going to be the highest resolution that we can match right now. So I want to make sure that we can get to a point where it is a lot cleaner than this. So we have the visibility on there. Then we can go to the suction target so that we can see it, and go to volume. And then the voxel size. This is how big the voxels are that it's going to try to aim for. So it was at 0.2. I'm going to try 0.1. And we can see how that starts creating a little bit of a better shape for us. 0.05. Oops, I got 2 points. That's why it messed up. I'm going to undo that. 0.05. There we go. And that is looking pretty defined. It's defined enough where it will shape it the way we want it. I'm going to go back to transform object, and let's play this and see how it turns out. So it's going about the same speed as last time, and here we can see it is kind of doming out and creating the words. We can see that we can pretty clearly see what each one of the letters are. We can see that there's a little bit of a gap on the E, which is really good. That's part of what we want. Okay, so let's go and clean this up more in the dot network. Okay, so now that we did that suction force, we can see that it added this anti-gravity and then the suction force here. So that's where we're going to do most of our work. The activation in the anti-gravity, that is what we want to manipulate more than anything right now, because if we turn that off, we should see a result that is a bit different. So we can see that it is affecting it by the text. Let's stop this really quick so I can navigate. We can see that the text is being activated a little bit, but it is not kind of bowing up the way it was before with the geometry. So that is good. So we could see what the anti-gravity does. It basically turns off the ability for the gravity to take hold on the flip fluid particles in that section that are being affected. So the other thing we have is suction force. So we have inside distance, outside distance, and suction strength. So pulling from the inside, pulling from outside of the geometry, and then the suction strength, how strong this is. So it's 1, 1, and 1200. Let's just go ahead and set these to 0. Let's go to frame 1. And if we set all of this to 0, we should be kind of at a starting point where it is not affected at all. The suction force, we should not see much, if any, CGI nerd coming through. That is great. That is exactly what I want. And here I'm getting close to the edge of the box, but I can look at splashes maybe around a second and a half. At 36, I will have the element start turning back on. So at frame 35, I'm going to key everything at these values that we have here. So I'm just going to hold Alt on the keyboard and then click on the activation on the anti-gravity. Then in the suction force, click Alt and set keyframes on each one of these. Then I'm going to move up one frame to frame 36. And on the anti-gravity, I'm going to turn that on. So I'm going to put it to 1 and set a keyframe. Alt click. Then I am going to go to the suction force, and let's turn it on to the defaults, although we'll probably change it. There. Okay, so I'm going to click Alt and click on each one of these. There we go. And let's go to frame 1 and recalculate this out and see kind of how it differs. So the beginning shouldn't be any different. We can see that it's slowing down a little bit because it knows that there's keyframes and there's going to change, but not too much. It splashes out. Then it's going to be here where it activates. Now it's slowing down because it's changing values. And then now the text is going to start coming out from there. And with these values taking hold now, it is taking a lot longer to calculate, and it's only grabbing 1 meter out from the geometry to grab water. The rest is splashing out and whatnot. So then we could get the shape that we want and start getting it to calculate out. So we can see that this is working pretty slowly, and we're kind of running out of water because the water is escaping from us. So I can adjust this a little bit, maybe start it earlier. So I just have the, can select both of these nodes, hold down Shift, drag on the timeline, Shift, click, drag, that will give us this. And then we can, is it going to let us do that? Nope. Okay. I am just going to... Oh, it did. I did Control X and it did it. There we go. I'm going to push it further over here, and let's do a paste. Let's see if we can paste here. Yep, it's pasting the keys. So starting a few frames earlier, let's go through and calculate that out. See if that helps any. Eventually I'm going to need to extend the range of this suction force and the strength of it. That is okay there, and then it starts pulling up. I like that a lot better. So here, let's see, we are at about, how many meters? Like is, we're at negative 15. Oopsies, I didn't want to do that. These are each 5 units, so this is like 5, 10, 15 units. So for the outside distance on the search, what I'm going to do here on frame 29 where the keyframe is set, I'm going to have it search, let's say 20 units. And then the suction force, I'm going to push escape so it doesn't calculate out and turn off the brain. Here, let's put it at 120,000 instead of just 12,000. And then I'm going to set keyframes, so click Alt and click on each one of these. That is fine. I'm going to go back to frame 1. And this is going to take quite a bit longer. But it should splash, come out, and then create the shape. And then we can turn off the suction force or decrease it as needed. Let's see how long this takes to calculate. And I need to turn the simulations back on. And try to calculate this. The beginning should be pretty quick. It's just this transition. It's going to be much, much slower. So now the reason it's taking longer and that it is calculating more here is because it's got a big search region that it is searching for fluids to pull back in. And we can see how much slower this is. So essentially you got the workflow here. What I'm going to do is stop the video and set some keyframes to get to the point that I like where the suction is working correctly. And then when I have that all set up, I'll come back and then we'll continue on with the project. From there, I'll tell you exactly where I set the keyframes and how it calculated out and everything. All right, see you guys in a moment. Okay, so I got the water simulated, and I did a little cache so it plays back normally or as close to real time as I can because it doesn't keep the whole thing in memory. You can see towards the end that I ran out of memory here. But this is kind of what it's looking like right now. It goes down, it splashes, comes back in, absorbs, and then kind of settles into the word CGI Nerd. And just to show you really quick how to set up the cache, because I didn't do that in the previous video, you can just go in and create a file node. Oops. File. Then here basically I keep the $sign sf4.sim because that's the type of file that we're going to be caching out. Go to option box, desktop splash. I created a cache folder, went in there, and then basically pasted it and gave it a name ahead of it. In this case, splash baked. And then after I did that, I switched it over to write, played it through. A good tip to do when you're caching it out, you can switch over to play once, so that way it just goes to the end and it doesn't loop around trying to write more files. And then after I've done that, I can switch over to read files. And when you switch it to read files, you really don't even need it connected here. So we can view this file here and push play, and it's not connected to the rest of everything because it is just reading the cache files that we created here. So the next thing that I want to do is look at the geometry and make sure that it's working okay for what we need. I'm going to go to the water geo_fluid, And here we could see that we're just looking at the dot network, but what we would render out is this over here, which is basically taking the particles and converting it to a surface. So it's trying to cache all that. Let's go back to frame 1 so that way we can see it. I just want to view the renderer here. And you'll see that if I play this here, it's going to be going pretty slow because it needs to try to convert everything we've just done in the particles to geometry. So what I am going to do is go to this surface node, which is basically what we are looking at anyways. This render node is just in case we want to add anything in between converting it to surface and the render. But what I want to do is, here we can see that we have a name for the geometry here that we're caching out. And then let's go look at the splash folder, cache, do that, and let's call it water geo. And that should be fine. Let's put a dot just in case. And then I can just click accept, and then now what I can do is I can write files like I did before. Let's go back to frame 1, and I'll go to write files. Let me pause the recording, and then when we come back, this should all be cached for us. I went through and cached out the sequence for the geometry, and let's go back to the beginning so that you guys can see how it looks. And I like the beginning, so as it comes up over here, CGI Nerd right here is pretty legible, but then it absorbs a lot more fluid, and then it goes through, and here it lets out some of the fluid, but I feel like when you're looking at it at this stage, it is still pretty kind of blobby. If we do some shader work, it'll probably look even better. But that's kind of where it ends. You can also play around a little bit with the particle to fluid surface. So influence scale, we could try like 1.1, something like that. And we'll see that it'll be quite a bit more legible once it finishes calculating the words themselves. So if we go back and forth from the cache to this, you can see that it's more legible. It's going to break apart the splash a little bit more. You can try around like the voxel scale, changing the value here. That will change the way it calculates out. So a bigger voxel scale will look worse, whereas if I take it and make a smaller voxel scale, it should look a lot more defined. Take a lot more to calculate. Also, with the cache for the surface and the cache for the particles, it was it took up a lot of space on my hard drive, so that's something to watch out for. If I had the voxel size this low, it wouldn't fit on my hard drive. And you can see how much it's calculating out. So let me stop that and put it to a little bit higher. Let's try 0.5. And it's calculating out much quicker now at 0.5 rather than 0.1. We will see this any moment now. Should see a little bit clearer. So that is quite a bit nicer. And if we were to increase this, we should see kind of smooths it out a little bit. Just going through and calculating out a lot. So with this, there's going to be a lot of calculation time between. And like obviously it's too much. If the thing to note with this right now, if you go to 1, it's going to give you an error, so you just have to choose something above 1. You can see that I'm losing hard drive space quickly. Okay, so I'll leave it something kind of like this, and you can see that the CGI Nerd is quite a bit more legible now. And like I said, the shaders are going to help it. So I'm going to shade, light, and render this now. I'm going to be using Octane. I've been experimenting with it a little bit. And I'm not ready to do a tutorial on Octane yet, but if it's something you are interested in, let me know down in the comments. So I'm just going to set this up now with Octane and render it, maybe make a few more tweaks. But I am going to adjust it here. Oh, also in the DOP network, let's go back to the DOP network. I believe, there we go. So here in the DOP network, just in case, you can see the settings that I have here. Maybe grid scale going down to 1 would be a little bit better instead of 2, but might get a better result. I might try that before I render. If I do, I'll let you guys know. But you can see my settings here. Then on anti-gravity, I basically am turning on the anti-gravity here, then turning it off at the end. Then you can see the different values that I'm changing it to here. So we have nothing, then we go to 110, 120, 110, 120 to, oh, that's where I'm turning on the anti-gravity. Then here, 120. So this is 120,000, and then it goes down to over here 12,000, and then we keep it there. So the outside distance is still bringing up some water, and then nothing over here. So it gradually kind of goes down. And I could probably tweak this to get it to work a little bit better. But this is getting pretty close because we could see in the particles it's getting kind of defined. But maybe in the suction strength here I can lower it and it'll be a little bit even better. Maybe I'll make those 2 adjustments and then I'll set it up on the render so that you can see. But I'll need to cache all this again. This is going to be grid scale of 1. Then on suction force, you can see the only thing I keyed there was the outside distance. And then here, the suction strength, maybe I'll lower it down to 1,000 and see what it looks like. I might completely destroy it, but I'll set a keyframe by alt-clicking. Okay, So I'm going to set this to cache, and then I'll go through. If I make a few more tweaks, I might, but I'll show you what that is, and then I will also do the final render. So when I come back, it should be completely done, and then you can look at the settings that I've gone through and changed. Alright, see you guys in a moment. Okay, so this is the result that I got with the settings that I had. I am not super happy with it. I did go ahead and update the settings. And to update the settings, basically what I did is I went into the Autodot network and went to Flip Fluid Object here. Oh, it's going to try to calculate all that. Let's escape really quick. That stops the calculation, but we can see that the particle separation here, I dropped it down to 0.05. In order to do that, I actually had to upgrade my system because I was crashing and running out of memory with the previous setting. And then I basically doubled my memory on my system, and then now I can do the particle separation at 0.05, which is great. It got me a much better result. So let's close out this one, and let's look at that result. Splash here. So this one ends up looking a lot better. You can see towards the fringes that I am getting that flickering still. I'm not going to go ahead and fix that because it is not too distracting in the point that I want to keep it where it's getting here. Maybe eventually at some point I'll fix it. But the idea that I had to fix it, that I'm sure will work really well, because you can see where it pools and there's a lot of particles, it's looking a lot better. So maybe instead on the, I'm just using a ground plane for everything to collide to right now. Right here, so you have that black, the ground plane geometry. That goes to infinity, it's just flat plane. What I can do is probably do a static object that is kind of a little bit more bowl-shaped, just slightly, so that way the particles pool in a little bit in that section, and they don't go out to like infinity and slide over. Another thing that you can probably do is go into the fluids. Then you can make it viscous and then increase the viscosity a little bit so it sticks together a little bit more and it doesn't separate as much. That would be another option. It'll give you a different style of splash. And then the final thing that I was thinking that could improve this, that might make it look better, is adding white water. So it will add a bit more detail to the initial splash right here, and then you'll have a lot of particles spraying everywhere. So make it look more impactful. That could be pretty interesting. But those are the things that you can do to improve on this. Right now on this stage, I probably like it until it gets to here, CGI Nerd, and then I'll cut. So that way you don't get the parts that are too distracting. And but that is where I am leaving this tutorial. I think it gives you a good guideline on how to get this effect done. And other than that, we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.